Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for June of 2020. I didn't get to as many records as I really wanted to over the past month, and both of the requests that I have are still on the docket, and I apologize extremely for that, but I do have 9 records to talk about this month. I did some catch up, a lot of new stuff that came out I decided to take my time and highlight, and a lot of hip hop honestly this month. A lot of good shit to talk about, so let's go ahead and dive on in.
Rain on me.
I'll be honest, I was a little worried about Lady Gaga's new record, Chromatica, mostly because for the first time in her career since I've been listening to her, I wasn't sold on it from the lead single. She's always been great about dropping a great lead single that gets me hooked on whatever new direction she's deciding to take, and Stupid Love just didn't do that for me with Chromatica. I really don't like that song. I think that it's really dumb. The best part about the song to me is that vocal sample. That vocal sample is fucking killer. With that said though, the song itself, both sonically and lyrically, really embodies a lot of the ideas on the record. I just think the record as a whole does a better job at talking about those things more than this song did. But this song, or this album, is honestly really solid, and I think it's one of the more consistent records in Gaga's career. Some of the big things I really love about it are its sound. I love that it's taking that Eurodance sound that was big in the 90s and kind of bringing it back in a modern way while also being very nostalgic of that sound. Like, that's the best thing about Stupid Love is that Eurodance, like that sample. It's very, you know, 90s, late 90s pop in a great way. But same with tracks like Enigma and Replay and even Rain on Me, the single with Ariana Grande, or the drum and bass breakdown that happens on the Elton John collaboration, Sign From Above. Really, those tracks in particular, and the other track, Blackpink, Sour Candy, are great collaborations that see her really utilizing her features a lot better than some of the features she used on Joanne. I feel like it's a big improvement over Joanne, as the feature usage is incredible. I even like the interludes on here. Like, sometimes interludes, especially on a pop record, can just seem really gaudy and out of place, but I like the sort of breaks from the dance-driven nature that they present with the more ambient string-injected interludes that give a sense of gravitas to the record in a way that I feel like works really well. I also love the lyrical sentiments on a lot of this project. I mean, obviously, Stupid Love, it's about craving that love to an intense degree. But I mean, that's continued on tracks like Enigma, and even kind of in a sort of feared kind of way on Replay. And it's that yearning for wanting more is ringing true on a track like Plastic Doll, which also kind of taps into like a Nowhere sound. I don't know if Lady Gaga ever listens to Nowhere, but like her harmonies on that and the backing vocals sound a lot like Genevieve from Nowhere to a huge degree. That whole song sonically kind of sounds like something they would have pulled together, which I really enjoy. Honestly, my biggest takeaway from this record is that, like, this is kind of the pop record I've been wanting Gaga to make for a while. Sure, it's not perfect. I think some of the songs, especially by the tail end, are a little monotonous, a little sort of atonal. She kind of really reins in that pop sound really well. It just kind of gets played out by the end of it and has me hitting skip a couple times in the middle of the runtime for tracks that I'm not the biggest fan of. But as a whole, this project is really strong. I love the hooks. I love those Eurodance rhythms. I love the pulsing kinetic nature of this project a lot. And I think it's really solid. Honestly, a lot more solid than a handful of records in her career, in my opinion. I'm giving this a 7. I think it's fucking really solid. And I hope she continues to make records like this. Not necessarily in this style, but she continues to use the improvements she made on this record over other records and continues to improve upon it even more so in her already long-standing tenure in the pop realm.
The loud defier, the non-complier, the death defier, the Mike Meyer.
Y'all know I was hyped for this record. It was on my most anticipated releases of the year. I love RTJ, and ever since L has been hyping up that this is their hardest fucking record, I kind of agree with that sentiment. God damn, this record hits fucking incredibly well. It's just banger after banger after banger. L's production continues to be some of the most out there and abstract in the game without being too far out there to be accessible. You know, I love his production on here. I love the collaborations that come through on this thing. 2 Chainz fucking owns Out of Sight. Pharrell and Zack de la Rocha make a pairing I didn't think would work as well as it does. Gangsta Boo's hook on Walking in the Snow, and I love how cold that beat sounds. And I like the odd marriage of Run the Jewels, Josh Homme, and Mavis Staples on Pulling the Pin. It's just another great use of features that I'm happy to see. And the subject matter of this record is very blunt, to the point, and poignant, obviously. A lot of people are kind of talking about the discussions of racial divide that are continuing to throttle through the country. It's something I've addressed both recently in song and in video, and I feel like Killer Mike and Elle do their best to keep throttling that discussion in a very poignant way. Again, Walking in the Snow, Killer Mike's verse, is kind of iconic at this point already. Like, it's already one of those things that people were immediately talking about upon album's release, because it was recorded well before what's going on is going on, but it shows, you know, it is a showcase of how repetitive things have gotten in the discourse, and how yet, even though people are being very loud and vocal, it's still a problem. And that's the biggest point I feel like this record's trying to nail home, but I'm happy that they are continuing to throw that out. Mike, I can tell, is fucking frustrated with the fact that this is still this big of an issue. You know, because that's kind of a big thing throughout his a lot of his verses on here. But even just the hook of that, you know, really condemning the police force as being nothing but slave masters working on your dollar. You know, and Zack, again, continuing to prove why he's one of my favorite rappers, adds so much to the conversation with his verse. I love it so much. But they don't lose their sense of abrasiveness in a different kind of way, like on the Yankee and the Brave, which continues their conversation and themes that the record establishes, but in a very different way. Or on Ooh La La, which has such a fucking weird beat that works so very well together. Or on Holy Calamafuck. You know, there's a lot of moments where they engage in the conversation, but in a different way, and continue to throttle that they are the most consistent pairing in hip-hop today. It's on par with their best material to me. Like, I loved Run the Jewels 3 when it came out, but 2, as time has gone on, has continued to be my go-to for them. I feel like it's just more consistent across the board, and this is on par with that. I don't feel like they waste a single second on this project. Even tracks like Goonies vs. E.T. That sort of divert a lot from the conceptual, cohesive narrative the record has going on, don't detract all that much. You know, it's still a fucking bop, it's still a banger, and it has a dope-ass beat. I love this record. I think it's very, very good, and I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I've been listening to Xibalba since I first did the listening log. I listened to their album Tierra y Libertad, which came out in 2015, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was very okay. And I listened to their follow-up EP and felt exactly the same way. And I was hoping on a follow-up, Años de Infierno, they would kind of branch out a little more, because while I loved their really harsh, abrasive brand of death metal with a sludgier, sort of sandbelty twist to their sound, unfortunately, Años de Infierno, they sort of continue that path in almost an atonal sort of way. I like the sounds on this. I love the aggressive guitars and the all-out sonic assault that it presents, but I feel like not only does the production kind of neuter that, I can get a similar effect to a more intense degree by listening to like a Portal record. This album as a whole feels very one note. This is a very one-trick pony sounding record, which I don't feel like I had on Tierra y Libertad. And I wish the sonic characteristics from that were almost enhanced more on this, instead of they feel like they're watered down a bit. You know, the vocals don't do much flavoring to the mix. You know, the overall edge of this record feels very grinded, but it's almost grinded to a round, soft, you know, edge. You know, there's not a whole lot of puncturing going on this project, which I feel like is the biggest critical flaw of it. It's heavy. It's intense, but it's almost to a lackluster degree. As a fan of these sounds that they're toying with, I feel like even the tracks that I do enjoy, like Santa Muerte and the title track, and the closer, the two-part closer, El Abismo, they still don't do enough to stand that far above the rest of the record in presenting something really raw, really aggressive, and really visceral. And that's kind of upsetting, because I like these guys. I think they're fine enough. I think they're really solid, and they're consistent in that regard. But I just wish they would do something to retool their production, something else to give them that much more of an edge in the scene. Because as it stands right now, like I said in 2015, this is the most just okay metal release of the year. But because it is that much more milquetoast production-wise, I'm giving it a little bit of a lower score. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. I feel like if you enjoy death metal, just as a whole, if you're just a death, sludgy, doomy kind of guy, you might just like the sounds of this that much more than me. But as it stands for me personally, I'm clamoring for something a little more. If they're going to be doomy, I want them to be a little more sludgy. You know, I want them to be more in the veins of like a bong ripper. But if they're going to combine sludge with death, I want them to do something a little more raw, a little more intense, to me personally.
Milk. My two assistants, both white as milk. Made back inside, came soft as silk.
A buddy of mine wanted me to check out Lil Boat 3, mostly a track from it, TD, with A$AP Rocky, Tyler the Creator, and Tierra Whack. And while that song is great, the sample of the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift song is incredible. Everyone on that track, except for Yachty, is firing off on all cylinders. The project it's on sucks. Lil Boat 3 is another bloated, lackluster, flaccid, trap hip-hop release from an artist whose time really seems like it's gone. You know, I've never been the biggest Lil Yachty fan. I'm sure longtime watchers kind of know that at this point. I've shat talk enough of his projects or enough of his music for you guys to know he's just not my thing. You know, I don't like his flow on a lot of his songs. And I feel like one of the saving graces of the records of his I didn't like was the production. The production on this is even more lackluster. Even tracks like Oprah's Break Account, which has a decent piano line in it, is brought down by Yachty and Drake. The shining part on that is DaBaby, and he just kind of feels like he's on autopilot. Or Lemonhead, whose beat has a really nice synth line that is just squandered by Yachty's terrible presentation on it. You know, I don't like this record. I think that it's really forgettable. It's monotonous as fuck. Pardon Me has one of the worst hooks I've heard on this type of record in a while, and I think Yachty's this might be Yachty's worst project yet. You know, it's dull. You know, it's bad, but it's bad in a not exciting kind of way, and it's not the type of record I would really recommend to anybody who really likes this stuff. I don't know trap fans that are still clamoring for Yachty, because a lot more acts have come into the scene that are channeling his style in a way that is done better than he did, and even the jovial side of Yachty isn't really done well on this project, and that's upsetting, I guess. I don't know. I've never liked Yachty, but I know that he's not doing anything bad as a person. His music just isn't doing anything for me. I'm giving this a 2. It's not really fantastic. I feel like you could find much better in the scene than him, especially at this point in his career with this project.
First, lurch, curse, shots was close together like the gum.
So I'll be honest, I'm actually still pretty new to the Arm & Hammer camp. My biggest exposure to them outside of tracks here and there, or Billy Woods himself, was their feature on the last Blockhead album, Free Sweatpants, that I really enjoyed. And I'm kicking myself for taking this long to really dive into a full project of these guys, because Shrines is incredible. It has subject matter that's just as poignant on a record like the newest RTJ, but is a lot more abstract in delivery and is also just as up my alley. I am loving the beats on this thing as a whole, whether it's the really lo-fi driven stuff like on the opener Bit of Cassava, which lyrically and subject-wise down to its title is just super well pulled together. I love Earl's production on that. King Tubby has a loop that just is immediately memorable to me. It just hit me right there. I love the beat on that song. I like the jazzier stuff like Solarium and Leopards. I love the subject matter on that this project tackles as a whole and how it does it. Like I said, I already really love the writing on the opener and how it ties really well into the title of the song in a really abstract way. But I love how they create something a little less conceptual and more just doubling down on the abstract nature by having these vignettes or these offshoot tracks that are talking about whether it's stuff like coming up in the world as a black man, like on Pummel Horse, and as far as in relation to the world and its events, or on a track like Slewfoot, which talks about the financial come up and uses a great Marshawn Lynch sample to tie the whole track together. I especially love Billy Woods' verse on that song, or tracks like King Tubby, which delve a little more into a lot of what's going on right now with the movements that have been going on, the protests, but really making it a sharp point to talk about. I love the two tracks on here that are super feature heavy, like Frida and Ramsey. What Quell Chris does to open up Frida, or what everybody does on Ramsey's 2 with More Mother's opening verse being incredibly sharp. Earl, while he's kind of in and out, I love what he presents to the track, and I like a lot of how that track bleeds into the closer of the Eucharist as well. Elucid and Billy Woods' verses together just are fucking incredible. I love this project a shit ton, and I feel like if you enjoy abstract hip-hop, you've probably already listened to this. I know a lot of people who are into that scene are already sort of getting into it and loving it, and I'm kind of playing catch-up in that regard, but I'm loving this new Armand Hammer project. I think it's incredible. It's super up my alley for a lot of ways, and I love the chemistry these two have, and I've heard it's a lot more lighter. At least Mark from Spectrum Pulse said that this is a lot lighter than their other material, and I'm actually kind of intrigued to see what he means by that by delving into their last couple of projects as a whole. I know that they were really beloved, and I'm in it now, guys. I love this project. I'm giving it an 8. I think it's really, really good. And I feel like they cover all aspects in a really solid way. Even a track like Flavor Flav, which they use, the title to tie into just talking about time itself. Super cool. I dig it. It's a cool-ass project, man. This is a dope record. So I was afraid that in Chris Adler's absence, Lamb of God wouldn't have the same flavor to their sound that I had come to love. And while I don't think it's completely gone, this album has a lot of highlights, and I wouldn't put all of this on Art Cruz as a whole. The sound of this self-titled record by Lamb of God just doesn't hit me the same way that a lot of their projects have in the past. You know, especially coming off of one of the stronger records in recent memory, Strom and Drang. You know, I loved that record. I gave it a review on the channel when it came out. While I was underwhelmed by their Burn the Priest covers album, it was for a different reason than this. There are moments on here that I do enjoy. I love the opener Memento Mori. I thought it was a great single, and I thought it was a really good, you know, sort of flavor of this new era of Lamb of God. And I like tracks like New Colossal Hate and Well Enough and Gears and Checkmate. The initial run of this record is incredibly solid, up to snuff with a lot of their good material. This album kind of falls apart in its back half in a big way, in my opinion. I think a lot of the inconsistent production is also a problem. You know, the track Poison Dream with Jamie Josta, I talked about it being my most listened to song in recent weeks, and I don't know why, because I hate the production on that. The guitars just sound awful. I don't think Jamie Josta melds really well with the sound of Lamb of God, while Randy Blythe's vocals are in that same vein of like just super aggressive. I just don't think that they mesh well together. I think Chuck Billy is great on Routes. I think that that's an incredible song with a great use of different type of sounding guitars that suits Chuck Billy's vocals well, and I think he and Randy Blythe mesh really well together. Another issue I have with this record is Lamb of God are known for closing out on a showstopper. You know, Vigil, King Me, Remorses for the Dead, Reclamation, all incredible closing moments. And the closing song on this, On the Hook, just doesn't hit the same. You know, it sounds like just another mid-album cut that could be a good lead-in to a last song, but it closes the record just way too abruptly. You know, I feel like this record feels the most autopilot for this band, which is upsetting because bouncing off of an ambitious idea like a covers album for this band could have led to something a little more fruitful creatively, but it just doesn't come up to snuff. And again, I'm not going to put that on to Art Cruz, because his drums here are fine. You know, a big characteristic of their sound was Chris Adler's fill work, but Art Cruz steps to bat in a really good way, more so than other bands who would replace an iconic drummer in their band. You know, he's good at bringing a level of intensity that works for the band. He's good at keeping the groove and settling into it really, really well. I just think the band just isn't bringing anything that's super up to snuff to me. You know, there's highlights for sure, and there's, you know, parts where they try to tackle their own sort of issues with things going on, but it's just not as powerful as it could be, in my opinion, man. This album is really underwhelming and really disappointing as a result. I'm going to be giving this a 6 out of 10. Like, I wanted so much more from this, especially after waiting for 5 years for a full, proper album. It just doesn't work for me. I think it's kind of lackluster.
With my out of town ass, bomb on niggas like Nagasaki, rocket next to my pocket.
Freddie Gibbs, on the other hand, is continuing to churn out consistently great hip-hop with another project that sees him pairing up with a different legendary producer, this time the Alchemist, and he and Freddie Gibbs come together on an incredible project, Alfredo. The Alchemist brings together these soul-inspired, very vintage-feeling, and sometimes funky throwback instrumentals that have great samples, not even just in the beats themselves, but on the opener 1985 or on God Is Perfect, which feature Bernie Mac and Gil Scott-Heron samples that tie really well into the subject matter and bleed into the other tracks really, really well. The album itself kind of sees Freddie doing his own shtick that he's done pretty consistently throughout his career. On this project, he continues to reflect about his come-up or his time in drugs and crime, like on the opener 1985 and on Something to Rap About, which sees him talking about the cocaine slinging game, the drug dealing he did, and all the problems that came with that, and the struggles that he faced. You know, he talks about his come-up in sort of a more conflictive way, like on Scotty Beam, which sees some of the problems he had faced on the come-up, and even using Rick Ross as a sort of companion to that, a complement to that, to kind of talk about issues that of coming up has had, and all that stuff. He also uses these sort of lo-fi beats to create kind of conceptual songs, whether it be Frank Lucas, where he and Benny the Butcher do a great job at creating the song that is sort of in tribute to a drug dealer in the 80s in Harlem of the same name, or Skinny Suge, which has him comparing himself to legendary hip-hop name Suge Knight in his own sort of Freddie Gibbs sort of way. And I like this project. I think it's fucking great. And I think it has Freddie firing off on all the same cylinders he's been firing off on. Again, he's one of the most consistent dudes in his lane. I think he picks incredible producers to work with, and I think that he does a great job at pinning together not only some sleek, cold verses with some great flow switch-ups to some pretty solid hooks as well. This is just an all-around-the-board great hip-hop record, and one of the best I've heard this year so far. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. It's an incredible project that I feel like if you've slept on, you need to quit sleeping on it. So I'll be honest, outside of some singles here and there and Danielle Haim's contributions to the last Vampire Weekend record, I'm still pretty new to the Haim camp, and I'm using Women in Music Part 3 as a sort of entry point for myself into their discography, and I'm walking away from this project pretty happy with what I listened to. You know, I love the meldings of indie pop with a sort of dreamy twist, like on the opener Los Angeles, or tracks like Up From a Dream and Gasoline, which has sort of a funkier twist to it thanks to its production style, with alternative country twists like tracks like The Steps and I've Been Down, which has this very 90s Shania Twain sound to it that I really enjoy. I think it gives it this sort of rootsy or heartsy sound that bleeds really well in with these poppier indie atmospheric sort of textures fantastically, and it's all tied together by the three of them's talents at songwriting, and I think the lyrical arc that the record goes through also kind of helps unify those sounds under a really solid umbrella. I like how it starts on this sort of very bitter, reflective tone with Los Angeles and the Steps and I Know and Alone talking about the life you've lived and how it's kind of come into this world of isolation and sadness before sort of opening yourself up to more and seeing yourself getting swept up in the lust and romance of youth, and tracks like Up From a Dream and Gasoline and 3 a.m. The latter two having this sort of sexy swagger to them before bleeding into something, wanting a little more depth to your relationships, like Don't Wanna and Leaning on You and I've Been Down, talking about sort of the ups and downs of dating and the ups and downs really that can stem from getting closer to somebody, you know, in an age where somebody else could be right around the corner in somebody else's mind, and it's kind of hard to find love sometimes. And I like how this record tackles that subject, and I like the imagery that it paints within its lyrics, and I love the production on here. It's very rootsy, and again, that helps tie those different sonic atmospheres together. While there could be some warmth seen in the alternative countries, and you could picture some sort of coldness from the more synthetic driven tracks like All That Ever Mattered and FUBT, they do a good job at keeping the production consistent across the board with those. And the vocals on here are fucking gorgeous. I love a lot of the vocal harmonies on here, and I love a lot of the vocal lines on here. The choruses on here are very, very well done, and I'm really curious as to how the rest of the discography sounds, because I've enjoyed the singles I've heard before, and I gotta say I'm really impressed with this album, and I think that it's well worth your time if you want some sunnier jams to kind of vibe to in the summer. This is a pretty solid record. You know, it's nothing super perfect. It's nothing that I'm like top tier of the year material, but it's really solid. I really enjoyed this, and I think that these girls seemingly have continued to show that they're a group that's poignant with their lyricism, because I feel like a lot of it resonated with me in a really nice way. I enjoyed this. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. It's really good. It's really, really good.
I'm a liar, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner.
And the last record I checked out was the newest from Baltimore punk group All Time Low, Wake Up Sunshine. A band that, even though I came of age in the DMV area, I was never really exposed to. This was actually also my first sampling of their discography, even though they have this tenure that is a lot longer than a band like Haim. This album seemingly stands as a sort of bounce back, because I know a lot of people didn't like their last record, even though I'm not in tune with them, their music as a whole. I'm still very in tune with aspects of that scene, and a lot of my friends that talked about Last Young Renegade, or Young Last Renegade, their last record, people didn't like it. People thought it was really pandery and shit. And while there's aspects of this, I feel like, that are still there, as a whole, I feel like even if I haven't listened to the last record, if this sounds as solid as it does, I bet you it's still miles better than their last record. And I enjoy this project a decent amount. For a band who's been in it for a long time, you can tell these guys have really mastered the craft at a great hook with some nice, beefy pop production that really suits their gargantuan hooks well. I mean, from the opener, Some Kind of Disaster, I love the hook of that song, of Melancholy Kaleidoscope, of the title track itself. Even the interlude, Pretty Venom, has some nice, buoyant, poppy sounds in it that just kept me filled with this sugary sweetness. I can tell these guys really do have a knack for writing some decent cuts. My issues with the record more stem from some of the production. Some of the tracks and the track listing just don't hit as hard as others. And the collaboration with Black Bear Monsters, while I don't think it's as pandery as Last Young Renegade might have been, I still think it feels a little unnecessary. It kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in the track listing in a big way. But, I mean, you know, that's kind of a thing with a lot of modern pop-punk bands. If you get big enough, sometimes those worlds just kind of cross over in a way that that don't really suit, but ends up on a record anyway. But this record, honestly, wasn't that bad. It was honestly very, very solid. I feel like if you like All Time Low, you're probably really happy with this project. If you're like been like a longtime fan and you were upset with the last one, I could see you enjoying this new one. As an entry point, I'm sure they've done better. I know they've done worse, but I'm sure they've done better. I feel like this feels just like a veteran pop punk band just making another one to kind of win over some fans again. It has that kind of feeling to it, but that's not a bad thing. I walked away still enjoying a handful of cuts on here, and I'm not disappointed with it. I'm giving it a 6. And that's it. That's what I checked out over the last month. What did you think about the albums that I reviewed? Have you listened to any of them? Do you have an album you would like for me to check out? Linked in the description is the listening log if you want to see what's on my log or what's on my radar, what's been requested, and what I've covered already on this show. If you like this particular video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you would like to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content like an Patreon exclusive update video that went live today, or to help drive the community like deciding the next discography review, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. It's linked in the description. Either way, I'm going to get out of here. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.